Ma'am, please. Anything you can spare. I haven't eaten in 2 days." The words came out cracked, almost without breath. Ramiro Solís kept his eyes on the ground. His shoes were split open, his shirt was stiff with dust, and he pressed his old hat to his chest, as if the last scrap of dignity he owned was hiding inside it. In front of him, the wooden door stayed shut for a few long seconds, and in that silence, he felt the whole world turn its back on him again. One more time. He had knocked on 3 doors before that one. At the first, they let the dogs loose. At the second, they pretended not to hear. At the third, a woman told him to keep moving without looking him in the eye. Ramiro had gone 2 days with nothing in his stomach, but hunger was not what hurt most. It was the shame. Asking for food made him feel like less of a man, less of a father, less alive. Still, his body no longer obeyed his pride. Every step reminded him pride could not fill a plate. Then the door opened. A small elderly woman with white hair and a worn apron looked at him without fear, without contempt. She did not ask his name, where he came from, or what burden he carried. She simply stepped aside as if she had been waiting and said, "Come in, son. Nobody leaves this house with an empty stomach." That afternoon, Ramiro thought he had found food. He did not know it was the first step back to himself, and something in his chest began to beat again. 2 years before Ramiro Solís reached that door, he was not a man of roads or handouts. He had a little adobe house on a red dirt ranch, an old pickup that coughed every time it started, and an honest job hauling loads from town to town. He left before the roosters cried, with the smell of coffee clinging to his shirt, and came home at night with rough hands, a clean conscience, and children running to meet him at the gate, as if even exhaustion deserved a reward after all. Lucita, his wife, was the kind of woman who could stretch 1 peso as if it were 10. She had a long braid, an easy laugh, and a way of looking at Ramiro that made poverty feel lighter whenever love sat at the table. Martín ran barefoot through the yard. Soledad fell asleep with her fingers in her mouth, and at night the 4 of them ate beans, tortillas, and a small hope that still seemed enough for everyone. At that poor table, nobody ate alone, and nobody cried alone. They were poor, yes, but they were not alone. Many things were missing in that house, but never warmth. Clothes hung from a wire, smoke drifted from the stove, and a woman's voice called, "Dinner is almost ready," while the children laughed in the dust. Ramiro believed life, hard as it was, could stay that way forever, but one dawn, Lucita came down with a fever, and from that day on, silence began walking through the house. No one knew it yet, but Ramiro's home had just begun to break. Lucita's fever came on an ordinary afternoon, the way tragedy comes when poor people have no money to defend themselves. Ramiro pawned the pickup, borrowed what he could, sold his tools, and followed doctors who spoke in low voices. For 3 weeks he believed one more prayer might reach her, but before dawn one morning the house lost her voice. The children were asleep in the next room, and Ramiro learned that silence could weigh like wet earth on a man's shoulders. After the burial, Lucita's sister took Martín and Soledad to the capital. She said there would be school there, work, and a safe plate of food, things Ramiro could no longer promise. He signed the papers with a shaking hand, though inside he wanted to scream that he was still their father. That night he returned alone to the adobe house. Lucita's dress still hung from a nail, as if it too were waiting for her to walk through the door and make everything begin again. He sold what little was left, lost the pickup, and took any work he could find, hauling bricks, washing cars, watching another man's cattle for a plate of beans. But grief walked with him like a stone hidden in his chest. He grew thin, his eyes sank, and people began to look at him with suspicion. So when he reached San Isidro after 2 days without food, he was not only begging for a meal, he was begging for someone to still see a human being in him, even for 1 minute. Doña Praxedes led him into a humble kitchen, where smoke from the griddle smelled of firewood and freshly boiled beans. Ramiro remained standing, unsure whether to sit down or apologize for being there. She did not rush him. She took out 2 warm tortillas, served beans from the pot, and placed a fried egg on top, the one she had saved for her own supper. When the plate touched the table, Ramiro's hands trembled, as if they no longer knew how to receive kindness. At first he ate slowly out of shame, Then came the sad urgency of someone who had spent too long holding himself back. Doña Praxedes pretended not to notice his wet eyes or the way his elbows guarded the plate. She pushed the salt closer, poured him fresh water, and went to sweep the other side of the kitchen. She understood what many forget. Sometimes true charity means helping without making the one who receives feel small. When he finished, he tried to say thank you, but no sound came out. The old woman pointed toward the yard and spoke as if it were nothing. "Out back, I have a little room where I keep the corn. It is not much, but there is a mat." Then she added, "Nobody leaves this house with an empty stomach." That night, under a roof that was not his, Ramiro cried quietly for Lucita and his children. He thought he had been given food. In truth, he had been given dignity. By dawn of the fourth day, Ramiro had fixed the corral fence, stacked the firewood, and covered a roof leak with old tin. Doña Praxedes watched without asking a thing, as if each hammer blow returned a piece of the man he used to be. Before he left, she wrapped 2 gorditas, a piece of cheese, and some peanuts in a napkin. Then she placed a coin inside a white handkerchief with blue stitching and gave it to him, as if handing him more than money. Ramiro tried to refuse, but the old woman closed his fingers around the handkerchief. "It isn't for you to pay me back, son. It's so you reach where you must go." When he asked why she helped when she had so little, Doña Praxedes said, "The one who gives from what is left helps. The one who gives from what is needed loves." Ramiro kept those words in his chest with the coin he swore never to spend. Even if hunger returned, that coin was no longer money. With the handkerchief hidden in his pocket, Ramiro reached the capital to find his children. His sister-in-law received him with suspicion, but Martín and Soledad ran to him as if no time had passed. That embrace gave him direction. He began hauling sacks, sleeping in warehouses, and saving peso by peso. Years later, he would have trucks, employees, and a home again. But in the bottom of a drawer, the coin still waited for the day he would return and fulfill a promise he could not yet name. 12 years passed before Ramiro took the old road back to San Isidro de las Palmas. He no longer wore split shoes or begged for food with his hat in his hands. Now he owned a small business, had employees who respected him, and a home where his children slept safely. But in his chest pocket, he still carried the white handkerchief and the coin. Every mile tightened his throat, because he did not know if Doña Praxedes was still alive, or if the chance to thank her had already slipped away. As he entered the village, everything looked smaller. The plaza, the church, the dirt streets, even the rusty sign he had once seen through hunger. He asked for Doña Praxedes' house with a steady voice, but his heart struck his ribs like it had that day at her door. The little house was still there, white and tired, with a crooked basil pot beside the step. Ramiro knocked softly, as if one touch could open the past and break it in his hands before he was ready to face it. A woman in an apron opened the door, drying her hands. Ramiro took off his hat and said he was looking for Doña Praxedes, the woman who had helped him 12 years before. The woman stared at him until tears filled her eyes. "She's alive, yes, but she's weak. Come in." In the room that once held corn, Ramiro found her in a narrow bed, fragile and almost transparent. She looked at him slowly, barely smiled, and whispered, "The one who fixed the fence. I remember you, son." Ramiro knelt beside the bed and took Doña Praxedes' hand, the same hand that had served him a plate when everyone else had turned him away. He made no speech. He opened the white handkerchief, worn by time, and showed her the untouched coin. The old woman smiled through soft tears. Only then did he understand he had not returned to pay for a meal, but to honor the woman who gave him life back when he no longer knew how to go on. Their silence said more than any thank you. That same afternoon, he brought the best doctor in the region, repaired the roof, replaced the bed, put in windows that shut well, and left money for medicine, food, and company. When her goddaughter said it was too much, Ramiro looked at Doña Praxedes and answered with a broken voice, "The one who gives from what is left helps. The one who gives from what is needed loves. She gave me from what she needed. I still owe her. And if I can, I'll repay her by serving others like me." But Ramiro did not stop there. He bought a piece of land beside the church and built a dining hall with white walls, long tables, and the smell of warm tortillas. At the entrance, he had these words painted: "No one leaves here with an empty stomach." Doña Praxedes lived long enough to see it, and months later she died in peace, her rebozo on her shoulders. Today, the white handkerchief hangs on one wall, and every plate served proves one small kindness can return as a true miracle.